The angle of these reflections comes from a place of how can we have any assurance, how can we have any confidence in the vast information available out there that we are now being exposed to. This poses a big question in its own right, and I have something submitted here in advance, which I will read in a moment. But before going there, I would like to give the entrance to these reflections from this highly specific spiritual concept of the Soma. Therefore, these reflections are in relation to what really is going on in terms of this, what requires our emotional responses. What is really at play, as opposed to what seems to be at play, and it is much easier to take the side, any side that serves the narrative of our own deeply held aspirations, conditionings, belief systems, ideologies, and so forth. And yet, in doing so, we inadvertently follow that same very pattern which placed us here in the first place, in this exact predicament of having a war. And may I just add here immediately that although the current war, which is being spoken of as Russian-Ukrainian conflict, is only one of many wars that are being waged right now on the planet Earth. Only one of the military conflicts where civilian people paying the price with the dear life for these, what could be spoken of as hidden or not so hidden agendas of the so-called elite or ruling classes. But that's again a cop-out perspective. So as soon as I said this, I want to say that that perspective, although may be comforting in a way, because it kind of gives us the possibility of removing ourselves from any responsibility we may hold with regard to this whole situation, because this situation is not created by you or me, or so it seems, and therefore we seem to be faced with the inevitable. We already, right here, right now, are bandaged by this situation, and the wound of the guilt is leaking here, simply to remind us that we are alive. Somehow we are not immune to what is happening, even if it's not happening right here where you happen to watch this video, even if it's not happening at the epicenter or many of its epicenters. It is still somehow affecting us. So to this I would like to speak. To this subtler, more hidden dimension of any conflict, just as it has been dispatched in the first video in response to the current events, in response to the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, where some of the considerations has been put forth culminating in a state of resolution not to take any sides. And of course this prompted a lot of responses from many of you, mostly shared responses to that perspective. But some of course were perplexed, because some somehow detected that this position of so-called neutrality is also potentially a position of withdrawing oneself from any emotional involvement, from any so-called psychological sense of guilt that this current situation requires, begs, shouts, screams for each and every one of us to orient ourselves, and as firmly as possible, so as to condemn what universally maybe already has been acknowledged as the side of the aggressor and the side of the victim. So in other words, that dynamic here at the face value of it all is not a rocket science. It's fairly straightforward. We have an aggressor, and we have a perpetrator, and we have someone who is now paying the price for it. But of course, we all know, most of us know, that this is a very, very flat, superficial, and free of or empty of any complexities or nuances picture. And it doesn't give us any true sense of what is actually going on, because, let us face it, we have not a slightest idea what is actually going on. And it's not that I have somehow the secret keys to what is going on, but these reflections is to shed light on the possibility that there is always there, at a subtle level of affairs, that what we speak of here also has to do with the accumulation of certain forms of energy. We could even go as far as to make very simple conclusions which have been made already by my predecessors, by spiritual teachers, by psychologists, by leaders of various domains who have came to the realization that war is a result of a gradual build-up and accumulation of what we call stress. A build-up and accumulation of unresolved, undigested, unassimilated, unmetabolized stuff that, when it reaches certain collective proportions, erupts in the form of a war. And from that point of view, looking for exact culprit, looking for someone on whom we can pin that squarely, so as to absolve ourselves from any responsibility whatsoever for a deeper introspection of the situation, is often the way the society follows. And what we observe today in the media, that there is another war raging on, a war for your mind, a war for your and my emotional response. This war literally is aimed at further dividing yourself and myself into this fragmented state of affairs where the war became a possibility in the first place. In other words, very little, as far as I can witness, is offered out there that serves as that healing reconciliation of very deep-seated conditionings with which all of us are entrenched. And this entrenching, or being entrenched, subjected to this conditioning, this unprocessed information that we are subjected on in turn by continuous disinformation, creates further possibility for the rapture to grow. So in other words, we are not only amidst of a war, conflicts in various parts of the world, but we are right now amidst a visceral possibility for further rapture, to create a global war, to create a situation where that what is now being continuously unacknowledged, unseen, untapped into, grows into catastrophic proportions. So what is really here at play is that at the level of energy, and someone who took upon himself this task of clocking the work in philosophies, theories and methodologies of Tantra, where everything is understood from a point of view and from the perspective of all being various degrees of manifestation of energy. Everything, from these rocks that I'm surrounding right now, to the trees and shrubs, to more refined manifestations such as our thoughts and emotions. All these are but various degrees of energy. So in all this, the more refined stuff, such as what our thoughts and our emotions, produce in turn another form of energy. It produces a certain substance that when it reaches a level of collective proportion has almost a visceral quality to it. So let's say if there is enough or large number of people experiencing torment, suffering, disgust, anger, frustration, all these registers that are taking us out of sync with the reality of who we are, then that literally causes that thick cloud in the environment, in the atmosphere, where we in turn becoming subjected by that very, very cloud that we have individually produced because we have managed to contribute to the formation of that cloud, to the formation of the density of that energy. The reverse is true too. When there is enough number of people vibe and reverberate with the energy of equilibrium, contentment, love, compassion, all these qualities that are associated with the place and the state of where the disparity between various compartments of our neurophysiology are in sync, then likewise these dense clouds are receding and dispersed, and what we enjoy, all of us, often taking it for granted, the prevalent sense of that equilibrium now shared, and everyone can partake in that freely. So in other words, likes increases like. This is very, very old proverb, true to every situation, true to every condition. So this subtle substance that is produced always, directly linked to the state of our emotional body, directly linked to the state of how we emit emotions and what is the prevalent emotional response we have to any stimuli, to any information, to anything that we come in contact with, which in turn produces these emotional responses. So what this, if we put these two and two together, gives us is a very fascinating, extraordinary, and at the very same time, quite a terrifying picture of how everything is possible. Everything here is at the tip of our own responses to any situation, to anything that we are experiencing here. In my own teaching, from a very early on, especially in some of my very first, often biography-based interviews, I have tried to bring this concept of Soma, how the Soma here is that coveted substance, that lunar substance that trickles down here as the juice of immortality, is being coveted by all subtler creatures of various domains and various realms. In other words, it's that formidable substance which is only available at this plane of existence, where human beings are equipped with neurophysiology, and in order for the neurophysiology to function, it needs the body. In fact, we can speak about the body as being that very expression and the manifestation of all the laws of nature, where that nervous system is a perfect instrument upon which all these various degrees of frequencies playing various tunes. So in other words, it can play cacophony, and it can play the most extraordinary harmony. Or to put it differently, it is here to reverberate with anything depending on the skill and the understanding and the evolution of the one to whom this instrument is given. This is the terrifying part of being a human being. Exhilarating and terrifying as always has been brought together as that reminder of what it means to be alive as consciousness in the human body. So this very concept of being embedded with nervous system which is capable to reverberate and reflect all the cosmic laws, where that extraction of the lunar substance is attracting all forms of cosmic energies, some of which are less benevolent, some of them are downright, we could say, diabolical, demonic, negative. And it is these forms of energy that we need to make a full attention not to allow to partake in that precious substance. And it is from that point of view that my first reflections on the war and peace have pointed out the importance of not taking sides, so as to remain in a place where we can hold in all-encompassing view this totality of the situation, which doesn't allow to rend us asunder, where inevitably the emotional response would be such where we will begin to reverberate with less desirable resonance, and as a result attract these energies, or rather more than attract, feed these energies with the precious substance of our emotional responses. Ponder on this. This is worthy of reflection. This is something which brings this whole spiritual quest and raison d'etre of why we're here, in my view, on to another level altogether. The level which we need to speak more and more. So of course, these reflections are addressed mostly to those who already are on the path, those who already somehow understood that one cannot work at a superficial level of affairs, at a horizontal plane of reality only. That working on the horizontal plane of reality, trying to change it, is futile and a wishful thinking at best. Because the reality at the horizontal level is utterly and entirely dependent on what is taking place at much subtler levels, where that, what we call manifested level of reality, gains its provenance. So, working at the level of withdrawing oneself into deeper understanding that all this is a play of consciousness is one way of looking at it. And I agree, this could at times be yet another cop-out, spiritual bypassing, it is called. Yet another, absolving oneself from a place of any responsibility that might be there. Therefore, what I suggest here is to take that tantric approach of working with energy, understanding everything as energy, understanding that it is the cultivation of these benevolent forms of energy is very important. It is the understanding that if we are in a state of balance, we are naturally, by virtue of that balance being the manifestation of sattva, that what in Sanskrit stands for equilibrium, already makes these notions that we speak of as love and compassion a natural outcome, because that is a natural state of what sattva represents. And anything that lacking of that, anything that comes from a place of agitation, simply adds more into the conflict. It fuels the conflict. Doesn't matter which side one took in one's righteousness and in one's states of resolution to be of help for peace. But let us not forget, peace cannot be achieved at the level where reality is deeply agitated. Peace can only be achieved at the place where the conflict is prevented in the first place, deep within. So, these questions here were asked. How can truth still be discerned when some skaras are still active? And how does truth relate to truth from the capital T, such as that truth for which in Sanskrit there's a term sat? Well, first of all, it's almost impossible to discern where the truth is unless there is enough intuition already shining forth which will shed light on any information, whatever that information is, whatever and whenever its provenance. When we are, as it were, or rather when our mind is illumined by these qualities, of which I spoke in one of the recent videos, on that quality of pratibha, that quality of illumining light, of awareness, which brings everything into the light of awareness, into the light of consciousness, by shining light on the totality of the situation. We can then begin to discern whether this or that relative truth has any resemblance to the actuality of what's going on. Because in the current state of affairs we live in right now, where the media is filled with polarized perspectives, many of these perspectives also come under the category of pure invention of the mind, manipulation, fake. This makes it perplexingly difficult to discern what is actually going on, again, at that gross level of affairs. So, whenever we easily fall prey to any of such perspectives, what we do inadvertently, we solidify, calcify further that with this set of samskaras, set of these psychic impressions, which prevent us in the first place from illumining that, or being illumined by that quality of the intellect which all of us are embedded from birth. So therefore, if I were to refer to you to the work of such polymath and a great being of the past, Sri Aurobindo, who in trying to make certain very refined and complex Sanskrit terms into English, to kind of give them to English, because he wrote in English language when he spoke about different qualities of the mind. There was a quality of the mind that he spoke of as illumined mind, and that's the quality of the mind which is directly related to the quality of that pratibha I spoke to earlier, 2-3 days ago, when we have shared that clip. So until that illumining quality of our own intuition has enough power, we are, I'm sorry to say that, subjected to a constant lies, enshrouded in lies, because we cannot discern, and therefore we will just stumble in the dark, taking anything for whatever that is we prefer to identify with in any given moment in time. And that identification is dependent on the quality and the quantity of these samskaras. The denser these samskaras, the more likely we will be subjected to further indoctrination and further fragmentation in our understanding. And to the second part, how does truth, the small truth, relate to truth, the ultimate truth? Well, it relates in the way that there is no such thing as small truth. Ultimately speaking, there is only one truth. But of course, this is easier said than comprehended by our ability to analyze, scrutinize, and understand everything, because what we want is to somehow be assured and confident that the truth we adopt somehow reflects the greater truth of it all. Whereas in reality, none of the truths that we are surrounded by can truly be the expression of the totality of the truth. Because what that in turn will require is the transcendence of all the relative truths in the light of one and the only truth. But that is a totally different state of affairs. In that state of affair, there is no perpetrator and victim. There is no aggressor and aggressed. There is no black and white. There is no subject and object. There is nothing to complain about, nothing to lament. You see, it's not an easy perspective to adopt. And we cannot adopt that perspective unless that perspective is born out of direct cognition of that reality. When that is cognized, little need to be said. All questions fall away, all questions fall apart, because they're being reabsorbed in the light of all-encompassing truth. But before that takes place, before we are able to reflect the full potential of the light that we are, we need to be careful and attentive. What quality, emotional quality, do we give away? Because, as we have spoken just now, without knowing it, we can easily become partakers in that what only feeds here deep and dark forces in that more relative level of conversation. And we can't afford this. So I hope this somehow sheds more light on what it means to be able to hold the situation in the totality of all-embracing understanding. Because from that totality of all-embracing understanding, we can regain the sovereignty of who we are. And within that sovereignty of who we are, we reflect back that light, that love, that equanimity, spontaneously, naturally, without us even having to lose our voice to prove our point. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. That Shanti, that one of the most important of all the flavors, emotional flavors, known in Sanskrit as Shanta Rasa. Rasa is the juice of we spoke about. It's another term for this sap. And Shanta is the flavor of peace. There are many different colors, many different flavors. But that what transcends them all, and that what gives light to them all, is one and the only, transparent, translucent, unaffected, untouched, unpolluted flavor of peace. May peace be with you always.